The Sports Renegades podcast on SportsTownChicago.com. Okay, welcome in to the Sports Renegades here on SportsTownChicago.com. And yes, today we have a big show. We're going to be talking all about your favorite Chicago sports and everything in them. We're going to start off talking about the Bears and previewing kind of an exciting matchup between the San Francisco 49ers, a game that the Bears should win.
What we're realizing now is that the Bears are just they're not the best team, except their coaching staff is just really good. We've learned Fox and Adam Gase and Vic Fangio, they're just too good of coaches to go through a rebuild phase.
I agree with you. I think the coaching is what carried this team. I mean, and if you factor in a lot of the close losses that they had a close loss to Detroit that they really should have won. That game against Minnesota, they really should have won.
They should have, yeah. If Sherrick McManus doesn't fall down, they probably win that game.
That and the fact that they almost had an interception and the guy jumped right in front of him and caught the ball. I think that was not Stephon Diggs. Who was that caught
Diggs
it?
Was the guy that McManus was covering on that 50-yard touchdown that shouldn't have happened.
Yeah. So you had that, and then against the Broncos, you really had a chance to win that game. If you would have kicked the field goal instead of going for it on fourth, you actually would have won that game.
Right, and that would have been something if they found a way to win that game just because they didn't have Kevin White, Alshon Jeffrey, Matt Forte, or Eddie Royal.
Right.
And then Martellus Bennett got injured in the game.
He did. He got injured, and that game was it was an exciting game and stuff. And then, of course, last week on Thanksgiving, you end up getting a win that you really weren't supposed to get, but you got it. So I guess that makes up for one of the bad losses, either to Detroit, Minnesota, or Denver. Probably the one to Denver, because they really should have won that.
Right, and I really think we're kind of seeing that. It's a different era of Bears football where we can actually rely on good drafts to have good young players that are healthy and
That's
fast.
The hope anyway, right?
And strong and really good, and they'll be on their rookie contracts for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's really nice to see, and we're seeing that with actual NFL coaching. Jay Cutler has been a great quarterback this year. He's been a top 10 in my eyes, with proper coaching. And the other day, Lance Briggs came out and bashed Mark Trestman again for being a moron and a disgrace to the NFL.
I'm wondering when it'll end. When the bashing of Mark Trestman will end, because obviously it stuck with a lot of those players.
That's why I wish that Phil Emery wasn't such a jerk to Brian Urlacher, just so that Urlacher would have been there. Because Urlacher would have gone off on what an idiot Mark Trestman is.
It would have been better off if Urlacher was the coach.
Yeah.
Or doing anything other than listening to Mark Trestman.
Yeah. Briggs called Mark Trestman a micromanager, and that he's fine as a coordinator, except not as a head coach. He has no leadership. He said that whenever there was a fight that would break out in practice, Mark Trestman would turn his head, walk away, and pretend like it didn't happen.
Right, we heard that too. That he would reward. Well, he
remember Jeremiah Ratliff. He made him a captain after shoving a coach to the ground.
Last week of the season, he shoved a coach. I think he shoved Aaron Cromer to the ground or something.
Yeah,
like that. And
Mark Trestman
promoted
him.
Named him a team captain for that final game last year. Unbelievable.
Yeah, and he said that
he's afraid of him.
Yeah, he said that Mark Trestman was also the kind of coach that would tell you that you put trash in the recyclable bin or recyclables in the trash bin, like that kind of guy. And that's not NFL coach material, and I wouldn't be
Frankly,
shocked.
It's not even Canadian Football League material.
No.
And I know he was there, but I mean, it's really not.
Yeah, I really think that he really has no business being in the NFL. I think the Ravens are going to fire him after this season because their offense has been horrible this year.
Yeah, their offense, I mean, they took a huge step back. After being playoff contenders the last, 4 years, now they have, 3 or 4 wins. They just beat the Cleveland Browns on a fluky play in Monday Night Football. So, I mean, they almost lost to the Browns.
Right, and you're also throwing it, although they did have a backup quarterback and a backup running back.
Right, I know Flacco's out for the year.
And so is Justin Forsett, except still, that doesn't really change that before that, the offense was not good.
Right, and I wouldn't say Mark Trestman's a good offensive coordinator because
No.
he went to a team that had one of the best offenses.
Right, he's a terrible play caller.
And they suck.
They were never running the ball with Justin Forsett. They weren't even throwing it to him very often. And as I said, if he's going to be some sort of coach in the NFL, the only job he's qualified for is the quarterback's coach, and that's just so you can have your backup quarterback looking like Aaron Rodgers for a couple weeks.
Right. And
you also kind of remember that after watching this year, it's kind of funny that Mark Trestman thought Jimmy Clausen was a better option than Jay Cutler was last year.
Right, he's the one that made the switch, too, to start Clausen over Cutler because everyone thought Cutler was so bad. Well, take a look at what Cutler does now with a competent coaching staff.
Right, he hasn't had, before this year, he didn't have a single good quality offensive mind.
Even with Lovie Smith, he was good. The problem with that was he kept getting injured.
Yeah. I mean, it was mostly because of the concussions from taking hits because of the awful offensive line.
Right.
I mean, before this year, the only decent offensive mind he had was Mike Martz, and his quarterback system was just so outdated, and it did not fit a system that had no wide receiver talent and virtually an invisible offensive line.
Right. And so getting back to the Bears this year, they have 2 home games in a row now, correct? I believe they're home against San Francisco, and then I think they have another home game right after that.
Is it against Detroit?
No. Detroit is the season finale.
Detroit's the season. Well, that's another. We'll see. We'll see if we'll be rooting for them to win or lose that game.
I believe Washington.
Next week, Washington. Yeah. Then they're at Minnesota, at Tampa Bay, and at home against Detroit, and realistically, they could win all those games.
They really could. The toughest one right now would be Minnesota, obviously.
And then they would finish 10-6, where before this year, I think a lot of people were saying that the Bears would be lucky to win 5 games again.
Right.
Except then we're kind of realizing with what a difference that quality coaching can make. This team has less talent than last year's roster, and yet it's better because of really good coaching.
Exactly. And, I guess now we're sort of to the point, especially, I mean, the Bears should beat San Francisco. If you lose another home game to a bad team like San Francisco, there's really big problems. Because they still only have one home win, and that was the game we were both at against the Raiders.
Is that really the only home win they have?
Only home win.
So they've got 5 wins, and 4 of them have been on the road.
Let's
correct. See, Green Bay was on the road.
Green Bay.
St. Louis was on the road.
Kansas City, and San Diego. Those are the 4.
Wow. I didn't even realize that.
So
last year, I think they won one home game, too, and that was the game on my birthday.
Yeah, something like that. So
we were, by process of elimination, we were at the best home game of the season.
Yes, we were.
The only win.
It was exciting, too. But yeah, two home games in a row now against San Francisco, and then the 13th against Washington. So you have a really good chance of winning these 2 games. And if you win these 2 games, you'll be 7 and you'll be 7-7. Or 7-6, I should say.
Right, 7-6, and as I said, if they win out, they're 10-6.
And then you gotta
probably be in the playoffs.
Yeah, well, you got to hope Seattle loses, and you got to hope Atlanta loses.
That's why we needed the Seahawks to lose to Pittsburgh last week.
That would have been nice, and Pittsburgh kind of let that game get away from them at the end, and Russell Wilson threw 5 touchdown passes. And as far as Atlanta goes, I'm not too worried about Atlanta. I think they'll lose. I'm worried about Seattle. Because Seattle, at the end of the season now, they might turn it on and they might be okay.
Also throwing the fact that they have the tiebreaker over the Bears in head-to-head record.
Yes, they do, and that's not good. It's always bad to lose to NFC opponents, especially in your division, but also outside of your division.
Right, and I mean, there was nothing they could do in that game. Everyone was expecting them to lose. I remember saying that I thought this was going to be the first time they get shut out in a long time, and that was just because Clausen was playing with no Jeffrey. Or Kevin White. I don't even remember if Eddie Royal played in that game.
I believe it was, 6-0 at halftime?
It was, and then there's the kickoff return touchdown to open the second half, and that's when the game was sealed.
Yeah, 26-0 loss. They had nothing going there, mostly because Jay Cutler wasn't playing.
Right, and I remember in that game, it was late in the game, I think it was still maybe 16-0 or something. Maybe still 13-0. I remember the Bears didn't go for it on 4th down from around midfield. They were in Seattle territory. They didn't go for it on a 4th and 3. And Phil Simms, I remember, said that he didn't like the move and that they should have gone for it. And then like a minute later, he was talking about how much he liked that the Bears were punting and that it was a good move.
Oh, you can't listen to Phil Simms.
I know. It's funny.
He's
listening
all
to
over the place.
The Phil Simms isms.
Yeah, he's. I mean, he is as bad as it gets.
Yeah, my favorite broadcasting team is the Monday night one with Mike Tirico and John Gruden. A lot of people don't like John Gruden. I think he does a really good job.
Exactly. I completely agree with you. I think he does a pretty good job. Certain times he's a little weird.
It's kind of like he thinks of like these analogies in his head that make sense to him, except if you don't know like an inside joke or something, you're not going to get it. Except his analysis, I think he's one of the best analysts. It's kind of like Eddie Olczyk for hockey and Steve Stone for baseball.
Yeah.
There's no one that's better than those guys. And I think John Gruden's the same way. I really love him and Mike Tirico. Even like for an awful match of like the Browns and the Ravens, Vince, one of the reasons you tune in is to listen to those two guys.
I agree. I think I like them both. The Sunday Night Crew is fine too.
That's why I like Monday Night Football more than Sunday Night, is because I like Mike Tirico and John Gruden better than Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't like Chris Collinsworth either. I think he's okay.
Everyone loves Al Michaels. Yeah, I don't think Collinsworth is as bad as some people make him out to be. I mean, Al Michaels is good. He's just been around for so long that you just have to like him. He does do a good job. I don't think anyone can beat, though, the Mike Tirico, John Gruden tandem. And with
I agree.
With that, that's going to take us to our first break. We're going to be back to talk more about the NFL when we come back instead of just the Bears. So you're listening to the Sports Renegades on SportsTownChicago.com.
The Sports Renegades podcast on SportsTownChicago.com.